The New York State prison system is under intense scrutiny after officers fatally beat an inmate last month. The family of Robert Brooks announced a lawsuit against those officers yesterday. Here's Brooks' younger brother, Jared Ricks, speaking at a press conference in Rochester.
People who are incarcerated are human beings. They have rights. They deserve to live without fear that something like this could happen to them.
Governor Kathy Hochul ordered all 14 employees from the prison near Utica to be fired. But it's not that easy. There's a special system in place that protects corrections officers from being fired, even if there's evidence of abuse or wrongdoing. Inside the blue wall that protects COs, on today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Claxton Hepburn Medical Center, dedicated to providing patient care and regional services to the people of St. Lawrence County. ClaxtonHepburn.org.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Thursday, January 16th. First up, President-elect Donald Trump is reportedly considering an executive order to protect gas stoves from local and state bans. As Rebecca Redelmeyer reports for the New York Public News Network, that could target states like New York.
New York became the first state to pass a ban on gas stoves in 2023. It's meant to reduce climate warming emissions and potential health concerns associated with gas appliances. The ban is set to kick in next year. It requires some new construction buildings to have electric appliances. It does not impact gas appliances that people already have. Last week, Reuters reported that two officials familiar with Trump's plan said the president-elect is considering an executive action to protect gas stoves. Amy Turner is with the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia University. She says it's unclear what an executive order could do.
Gas stoves are not well suited for limitations through executive order, which isn't to say that the Trump administration won't try something.
Turner says the president doesn't have much authority to regulate stoves. Generally, appliance regulations require an act of Congress. But she says Trump could set funding requirements that essentially punish places that prohibit gas stoves, which the president does have power to do. In Ithaca, I'm Rebecca Redelmeyer for the New York Public News Network.
Last month's beating death of an inmate at Marcy Correctional Facility outside of Utica is drawing attention to exactly how instances of violence inside state prisons are investigated and how corrections officers are disciplined when appropriate. A group of reporters from the Marshall Project, a news organization that covers criminal justice, has been digging into that system, sifting through thousands of disciplinary records spanning a dozen years. Emily Russell spoke with one of those reporters, Elisa Santo, about what they found.
We looked at records that were from 2010 to the spring of 2022. We took a previously secret database that was secret. No one could access this until the legislation changed it in 2020 to open it up. And, we had almost 300 cases of abuse or covering up of abuse where the state found that it happened, tried to fire the officer for it, and they only were able to fire the officer in 28 of those cases. So the two main ways that those officers maintained their jobs was first, the department settled many cases for lesser punishments or dismissed the charges. But then another major reason is because under the correctional officers union contract with the state, they can appeal their firings to an outside arbitrator who has final say over who keeps their job and who doesn't. It's not the prison commissioner. It's not the governor. It's an arbitrator. And we looked at 140 appeals to arbitrators that officers filed when they were fired for abusing people or for covering up abuse. And arbitrators gave 75% of those officers their jobs back. So all these things contribute to this culture.
I know it took you guys years to kind of sort through all of this data, but when you started connecting the dots, do you remember what your reaction to this kind of culture was when you started really piecing the puzzle together?
I was very surprised to see such a low rate of success for the state in their firings for abuse, especially given how many years that this has been an issue in New York State, in either the Correctional Association pointing it out or new deep investigative work by reporters pointing it out. The contract has been renewed multiple times since these stories have pointed this out, and the disciplinary process remains the same. It's actually, the contract says they're supposed to be using 3-person panels right now, but they don't. They still use single arbitrators, and the contract has said that since 2019. So it's just this like system that's obviously incredibly difficult to change. It's very ingrained.
So you and the team of reporters at the Marshall Project reported on something you call a blue wall among corrections officers. What is that, and why does it make it so difficult to hold officers accountable?
So basically what we noticed as we looked at case after case after case of excessive force was, after the incident, officers would come together. There would be a narrative that was put forward. Often the narrative included that this person had attacked them, and then that person was sent to solitary confinement. And so this is incredibly important because this is the culture that is inside of New York prisons. And this is such a, I think, more difficult thing for policymakers and advocates and anyone who thinks about these issues to address, because when you have this culture where basically your safety can also rely on your willingness to go along with cover-ups, and we saw that in cases we looked at, so it can be very difficult for people actually to come forward with what they really saw because they're dependent on the other officers when they're working to keep them safe.
What was your reaction to seeing some of the footage of Robert Brooks, who was fatally beaten at a correctional facility near Utica in early December? And I also wonder, like, what stood out to you in that body camera footage?
Having covered this before, the level of violence is, of course, incredibly shocking to see. However, having read about many incidents that were incredibly violent, I wasn't surprised. I think the most surprising thing initially was just that video had been released so quickly and that it existed to begin with. You know, I've known that New York corrections officers, that some of them wear body cameras, but it's been a pretty limited rollout. So to actually see video from multiple angles and then to see the reaction of people, I think that stands out to me and a lot of people, the mundane way that people kind of are standing around. So Robert Brooks is the second body camera footage I've ever seen from inside of New York state prisons. We had reviewed a video for our reporting, which was body camera footage of an attack on someone named Melvin Virgil. And this case illustrated the ways that the officers all basically came together on the same story of what happened, which was clearly contradicted by the video. They said that he had remained combative and that they had struck him once in an attempt to get him under control. But he'd been struck 6 times. And at the time they said he was combative, he was actually unconscious in the video.
After this body camera footage came out in late December, there has been this kind of push for reform in prisons statewide and, you know, increasing the use of body cameras. I wonder, you know, considering the reporting you've done and how long you've been tracking violence against inmates in prisons, how do you expect this moment to play out?
I think the video is the major difference here, obviously. It's very disturbing to actually see these things. And in the past, with New York prisons and the violence, it's been written stories. There hasn't been this kind of just shocking video. We put out a video, but it never hit the just level of interest that this video has, where it's on network news. It's being talked about all over the country. It's being talked about in other countries. So, you know, you could potentially think, oh, wow, that's going to really change things. You know, maybe that's going to change things. But I also don't know at all. Like, there's been years of attempts to change this. I mean, just the design that arbitrators have a final say over who works in the prisons has been multiple attempts to change that over the years, unsuccessfully.
Elisa Santo is a reporter from the Marshall Project. She spent years investigating violence against inmates in New York State prisons. She spoke with Emily Russell. We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Ben Sharon of Watertown and Michael Hart and Ramon Vasquez of Malone. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.